Hello, friends. This is Dave Hurwitz, executive editor at ClassicsToday.com, here with the next in our series of how to listen to great music. I have to move these CDs around a bit. Hang on one second. There we go. Okay. Now, we have been listening and making our way gradually through the Brahms Second String Sextet. This is the sextet in, there it is. It's in G major. Yeah, I knew that. Opus 36. On Naxos with the Stuttgart soloists, and we are up to the third movement. Now, this is a wonderful work to sort of cut your teeth on or break your bones on or whatever it is to get started with, even though it's a very sophisticated work. It really is. But I think you should start with something that has a little bit of, intellectual and emotional ambivalence and substance and because you can do it. I mean, because this isn't hard. It's a question of experience more than anything else. But the third movement is marvelous because it allows us to talk about an entirely new form. You may recall the first two movements are inversions of sonata form, the opening movement and the scherzo. But this Adagio, which means quite slow, in some scores it's poco Adagio, which means a little bit very slow. I mean, it doesn't matter. It is a theme and variations. And theme and variations is one of the great forms of classical music. It is self-explanatory. It consists of a tune and then variations. But because this is a slow movement, you're not going to have dozens of variations because, in classical music, or in any kind of music for that matter, slow means big. It means long. And so this movement is about 10 minutes long. It's as long as the first movement, basically, without the exposition repeat in the first movement. If you do it, then the first movement is 2 minutes longer. But basically, it's the same length. So it's the second largest movement in the entire work, and it is a slow movement, and it consists of a theme, 5 variations, and a coda. Now, themes and variations are a world unto themselves. They come in all kinds of speeds and shapes and varieties. And the key, though, to all of them, what they all have in common, is that you have to know the theme. You must know the theme. The best way to understand what's going on in the variations is to listen to the theme. That does not mean you will always hear the theme. And you won't, particularly in this set of variations, at least not very often. What you will hear is shapes and structures. And Brahms will tell you where you are, but he's not going to repeat the tune in its original form. Because this particular theme in variations isn't just, you hear a tune, and then here's variation 1, and then there's variation 2, and there's variation 3, and there's variation 4, and then it stops. And you hear the tune again. Not at all. This movement is a journey. It's a journey that occurs through theme and variations. In other words, you'll recognize it. You'll know what I'm talking about when I play you the theme. Let's listen to the theme, shall we? That's the best way to start. Here is the theme. It's a very pensive, desolate, lonely little tune, isn't it? You'll notice it has no bass. There's nothing on the bottom. It's played by the violin with the second violin and the violas, and that's it. There's nothing happening from the two cellos, so it's sort of floating in a general atmosphere of quiet sadness, and or even despair. It's sweet and yearning, and you can come up with your own description of what the tune is. But this tune happens to have, for all of its emotional spontaneity, and Brahms marks it to be played very expressively, it has a very carefully designed structure. This theme has 12 measures, 12 bars, that is, groups of, and these 12 bars are divided perfectly into 4, 4, and 4. The shape of the theme is effectively A, B, A. That is, you have the first 4 bars, which present a tune. Then the B section is contrasting, and it's a rising phrase that comes to a melodic peak, to a climax on the highest note of the entire theme. And then the first part comes back, but not literally. It comes back and then drifts off into an ending. And that ending is one of the things that you will hear in some of the variations. The ending is, right? Sweet Adeline. That's the last 4 notes of the theme. And so when you get to the ending, at least the first couple variations, that you'll hear that. You'll go, okay, that's the end of the variations. So how does Brahms continue with the variations? Well, before we get to that, I want to play you the theme again. You must know the theme. Remember the shape of the opening phrase. It's da, 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 just 4 rising notes. That's one of the kernels of the theme, and that's something that you may hear in some of the variations. Just 4 rising notes. That's how you know Brahms is using the material to write his variation, in addition to Sweet Adeline. And then that middle section with the melodic peak, the high note, that you may hear in some of the variations. What you will notice more than the theme itself is the shape of the theme, that A, B, A shape. And Brahms takes great pains to preserve that in his variations, because he's not going to let you hear the tune or even an obvious derivation of the tune. It's there. Everything is based on the tune. But the variations are quite different, and there's a very good reason for that, because the journey that this theme is going to undertake is one from this lonely, desolate, almost abandoned orphan of a theme to one of peace, tranquility. It's almost a lullaby, the last variation. It's exquisitely beautiful. So let's listen to the theme one more time, shall we? Because you really want to get that into your head. And it's elusive. It's not an easy tune. It's not one that you're going to go whistling, and humming afterwards. It's isolated. It's wonderful. It's just so emotionally suggestive. Here you go. All right. Now, let's talk about how these variations are going to work. And as they play, I'm going to play the whole movement straight through, 10 minutes. And I am going to indicate where you are in each variation. So keep your eye on the screen, even if it's not exciting as the music is going on, because I'm going to tell you what happens. In the first two variations are based on the theme most closely, probably. The first variation essentially just turns the theme upside down. It's more or less the same. You can hear it, instead of going 1, 2, 3, 4, it goes 1, 2, 3, 4, like that. It goes the other way with a lovely pizzicato accompaniment from the lower strings. They finally come in and they're just going plunk, 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 plunk as the music goes on. And that only seems to add to that element of loneliness and isolation, I think. I mean, you may find it differently. The second variation is probably the darkest of all of them. Now the music has sunk down in timbre, and it's for the full string ensemble, but it's quite gloomy, actually, and it may be the emotional nadir of the entire movement. But then something remarkable happens, very remarkable. The next two variations are in a quicker tempo, and that quicker tempo is Brahms' effort to wake things up. He wants to wake up that tune, and somehow it engages in a struggle. It's a real struggle. And the rhythm is also very, very sharp. It's bum ba da, bum ba da, bum ba da. They come in one after the other with this dum ba da, like that. But one thing that happens in the remainder of the variations, numbers 3, 4, and 5, is that they are strict variations with repeats. In other words, because the theme was A-B-A, Brahms didn't have to repeat major sections of the theme. But now he does. And so you hear each variation is divided in half, and you hear each half twice. The first half consists of A. The second half consists of B-A. So the A-B-A theme becomes A repeated, and then B-A repeated for the remainder of the variations. And Brahms has a very good reason for doing this. He does it because if the quick variations didn't have repeats, they would only take half as much time as the slow ones, and it would be lopsided. He wants the quick variations to have their opportunity to make their full effect. And if they just sort of blew by in half the time as a slow one, they wouldn't have the necessary impact. So like we heard in variations 1 and 2, the theme in variation 1, let me be clear, the theme and then variation 1, which was sort of the upside down version, the quick ones do the same thing. It starts with number 3 starts dum ba da, dum ba da, dum ba da, and then number 4 is bum ba da, dum ba da, dum ba da. It's the same thing, only upside down. And you can hear that extremely clearly with the repeats. And I'm going to indicate where the repeats are, so you can hear very clearly where you are in each variation. So after the fourth variation, there is an interlude, because by this time we've had 2 quick variations now, and we've gotten fairly far away from the theme. And so Brahms brings back bits of the theme, the rising 4 notes that represent the theme. He lets us hear them, in their initial form, basically, for the first time since the very beginning of the movement. So we just know where we are. And with that reminder of where we came from, we get the last variation. Now, the last variation, number 5, returns to the slow tempo, Adagio, of the opening. And it's a lullaby, basically. It is pure and sweet and just the acme of innocence. All of the angst and loneliness and misery, if you want to call it that, and turbulence and stress has been completely purged. And this variation also is in 2 halves, both of which are repeated, even though it's slow. The reason Brahms does it now is because it's the emotional climax of the entire movement. And he wants to give us time to savor it, to savor the beautiful, consoling, luscious harmony. It's so beautiful and so heartfelt, but also so simple. It's pastoral music. It's like I said, it's like a lullaby. It really is. It's exquisite. And once that variation has been completed, we have a coda, a little coda which continues in the same mode as that lovely, innocent lullaby type variation, with a few reminiscences of the original theme with the rising four notes. Now, of course, totally surrounded by warmth and comfort and security, and the ending is just, oh my goodness, it just makes your heart swell. It's such a beautiful movement, but it's not an obvious movement. It is a little bit elusive. You may have to listen to it a few times to get what's happening in it. But once you know, once you understand how it's built and the progression from one variation to the next and the emotional journey that the music takes, it's one of the most, I mean, I don't use the word very often, but one of the most sublime things that Brahms certainly ever wrote. It is a genuine experience, a life experience. It really, really incredible. And whether or not you recognize the tune or not is totally irrelevant. You don't need to. You just need to know where the emotional journey is going and enjoy it for that reason. So now I'm going to run the entire movement, all 10 minutes, starting from the top, and I will be indicating where each variation starts and, where the half repeats are and whatnot, so you can hear very, very clearly how it breaks down. And I would suggest, once you've done that, once you hear it and you know, that you just take a step back and listen to it on your own with your eyes closed and just soak it in. Let the whole emotional journey simply, make its own impact on you without worrying about where you are or anything like that, because Brahms didn't want you to worry about that. I want you to know so that you can understand what it's doing, and so hopefully appreciate, I hate that word appreciate, love what it's doing more quickly, so I can short circuit the process a little bit. So here is the entire Adagio of the second sextet. I hope that that moved you as much as it moves me. And I must say, it didn't move me that much initially. It didn't. I was puzzled. I was genuinely puzzled. Some people aren't. Some people, it just hits them and they go, I wasn't like that. It took me several times through over a long period. I mean, I came back to it over months, not in years, not, minutes, to really begin to feel what's happening in the music. And that's often the case. You can't assume that, just because I explain it or just because it's great music or just because it's by Brahms, that, it's going to strike you instantly and there's something wrong with you if it doesn't. It's absolutely not true. Everything makes its effect in its own time. So I just hope that this has given you a sense of where this music is going. It is an extraordinary piece. And if you don't feel that way now, I can virtually guarantee that if you stick with it, you will, because the whole work is so beautiful. And then there's the question of how this fits within the context of the whole, which is the topic we're going to deal with when we're done dealing with each movement individually, how the whole thing fits together. So keep on listening, friends. Thank you so much for joining me. Take care.